So, so well, first of all, I went through all your docs, right, and all your projects, and everything looked very interesting. But I also realized that you have different visions of how to use CK, or everything is related to scalability, right? I don't want to deviate from that. But then your approaches are very different, right? So I like to start. Let's start with a context question, which is something that will help people to understand the role of CK in real uses or real industries. And the first question has to do on how CK, the question is very long, right? It's uniquely positioned to impact industries, but the short question is, where do you think CK may have the biggest impact in terms of industries, use cases? And if you can attach that to real world cases, that would be much better, right? So what is going to be the first killer app in the real world of CK? We can start with Ming, and then we can go here.
Sure. Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Neil. I'm the founder of Reddio. We are doing a parallel ZK EVM. When you talk about the impact of the ZK, from my perspective, we has been doing ZK for the past 3 years. I met Sylve for many years ago when we were at Stackware ecosystem, and along the way, we are listening to developers. They really need an EVM. That's where we build this high performance parallel EVM powered by ZK. But that's, to a lot of audiences, already a traditional use case. I talked to a lot of our customer and builders. Really interested to see what they are building. There are many. Maybe I just take one example just to explain. One of the customer called ISO Network. So they has been doing autonomous AI. So when it means autonomous, basically everything, when the large language model was running on the blockchain or off-chain, the off-chain logic will be verified through ZK. So that's something interesting to me, because a lot of customers like them has been doing the similar things to make sure the computation integrity is there. Look at all the OP ecosystems, right? Not so many people really care about that. But differently for all the ZK ecosystem, we see they really believe the computation integrity and build on top with so many different applications. And to me, that's very exciting. Yeah.
Thank you. Sylve, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, sorry, I was focusing. So I'm Sylve, I'm the co-founder of Hyle. We're a lean blockchain for probable applications. The one thing that I think is really interesting about ZK is that we first used it for privacy reasons. Zcash, for example, to hide things. You want to hide your transaction. Second, and that's mostly the paradigm that we're in, we're using ZK for scalability, make blockchains go fast. And that's where most of the funding is going right now. What I'm really interested in is using ZK for what I call flexibility. If I have to give you an example, one of my favorite ZK applications is, after ZKML, obviously, it's proof of passport or ZK passport. It is currently the best option that you have to prove that you are of a certain age or of a certain nationality. So DEFCON, for instance, did this. If you come, if I remember correctly, from Southeast Asia and you're able to produce a zero-knowledge proof of it, you get a discount. In any other setting, without ZK, you would need full-on KYC. And that means that it is more cumbersome, more expensive, and not as private. So it's the flexibility aspect of it that I really, really love. And that's the kind of project that we really want to support on Hyle, which is designing a system that solely made for these type of applications.
Thank you.
Sweet. Yeah, I'm Yush from ZK Email. Yeah, I also like thinking about applications from like ZK as proof of, like ZK being most interesting from proof of signatures. We've seen that from blockchain, you can prove blockchain consensus or blockchain transactions because those are, ECDSA signatures often, or in the case of Ethereum consensus, you have some BLS signatures too, but you can do general signatures elsewhere, and that's what I'm really excited about. So, I mean, I think a lot about signatures in emails, but also signatures in passports, signatures on websites, signatures in documents all over the place. So I think, yeah, I think if you can have a ZK proof of signature, then you can bring that thing on chain and interoperate with it with either money if you use the chain, or any other ZK proof of signature if you don't want to use the chain, which is cool. thinking of privacy against selective disclosure.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, I'm Ming. So you met me earlier. So I'm the co-founder of ZKM. Also, welcome you to our event, ZK Hub. So when I see like all the possible use cases, I like to think that similar to what we had done this before in both Web 2 and Web 3, is that every new innovation technology will probably enable you to be able to do something that we can't even imagine, like sitting here, right? So of course the first stage would be we try to do everything again, right? That's happened many times. In Web3, it's more so because we can actually do many things that existed before, but we're not satisfied. For example, the other day I was in San Francisco like 2 weeks ago. I heard someone saying, I'm gonna do ZK Binance, right? That sounds kind of strange because Binance is the biggest exchange. So why do that? Because it's a centralized DEX, right? It's a SEX, well, SEX. And with ZK, you can actually turn that into something decentralized while keep all the operation intact, right? So this is very exciting. And ZKM is project on ZKVM, we call ZK MIPS. This is the very exciting, I call it third generation of ZK technology. It's like in the beginning we have like circuit boards, right? And then we have CPU, right? That's the new thing. And the CPU enabled a general programmability, and that kind of created all the apps afterwards. It makes programming development much easier, more accessible, instead of like big corps that they can manufacture those like circuit boards. So same here, like ZKP is quite difficult, not because it's expensive, it's because it's expensive to develop, right? You need all that knowledge, and it's still case by case. But with the power of ZKVM, you can have that kind of generalized ability that enable all kinds of new apps that's not possible before. So that's what I got very excited. Pardon me, because I can't, like my colleague, peers here that give you a concrete example, but I'm sure the nuclear app is the one that we don't yet know today, but it will definitely appear because that's always the case.
Thank you. So summarizing, I have two answers that goes for verifiability of computation, and I have two answers that go for verifiability of data, right? It's quite interesting. But these concepts, the verifiability of computation and data, are not exclusive to blockchain, right? Especially the first example, and I like all answers, but I felt really close to the first two. Obviously, for obvious reasons, for the proof of age, right? It's quite interesting. We are now in the middle of a tender with the European Union, and they basically allocated 5% of the total budget to CK. So they say, do the solution, and then optionally, 5% to add CK on top of it, like sprinklers of CK, right? So I think the understanding of our institutions still in CK is still something to work on. But the first case about AI and CK ML and proving models, I think it's very interesting, and also shows that CK is bigger or wider than blockchain. So the next question is, how dependent do you think the success of CK is from the success of blockchain? How do you think the adoption of CK is going to move faster, or will reach wider audiences than the blockchain? And if so, it doesn't matter what is your question, but the second question is, why is CK so strong in blockchain and not so much outside?
I think that where we're going is not going to matter anymore. I like Ayush's idea of it's like an extension of signatures, and basically like blockchains are made out of signatures. And if we now have a better paradigm that just expands upon signatures, we're going to bake it in. So right now, we're in a fun situation where blockchains are 16 years old, and there's a 10-year-old forum posed by Satoshi Nakamoto they said, there's this weird area of math called zero-knowledge proofs. If that thing worked, it would be really cool to have it in Bitcoin, but hey, it's just a paper at this point, so we can't have it. And so now we're trying to cram ZK into blockchain. And it's really funny when you look about it, because if you look at the EVM, it's like it was purposefully designed to be ZK friendly. The hashes are very difficult to compute. And so it creates a weird situation where a lot of basically all the ZK research right now is funneled into like blockchain scalability. And the constraints that you have specifically on Ethereum is the 300K gas cost for a proof verification, which means that you need to use a proof system called ROS16, which is the most widely used system. But you have many other systems that you could use, but the design space, even like the field limits of the field elements are even constrained by that. So I think that where we're going to design blockchains around the affordance of ZK. And that's what we're doing at Hyle.
Whoever wants to take the next.
Yeah, I can take next. I think any technology takes time for people to understand, right? So when I was working for a company called Twilio, there's a lot of telecom engineers. They need to understand all the telco protocols in order to program, to connect to SMS and VoIP, right? But with the Twilio, with Twilio's API, you are able to connect within 5 minutes. Now the developer don't need to understand that anymore, right? I teach blockchain scalability at the Nanyang Technology University. 2 courses are focusing on ZK, but after 2 courses, the students are still don't understand how to code on ZK, which is normal, right? But with companies like ZKM and many other infra companies coming up, making the technology easier to adopt, at the same time, the underlying doing all the research work, I think for the students or the developers, they just need to understand this is the secure technology they need to go to if they are looking for such kind of solutions. And the companies like ZKM, right, can abstract all the complexities and the needs, and developer just to do the interconnection. And that's what we are using some of the companies like ZKM now. I think it will move there very soon.
Yeah, I feel like blockchains are just one step in the evolution of cryptographic infrastructure. There was asymmetric key cryptography, and then there was end-to-end encryption, and then there was blockchains, and then there was ZK, and then now there's more FHE, and soon there'll be witness encryption. And I just feel like blockchains have just gotten a lot of attention because there's a lot of money in them, but I don't think they're any more powerful than anything else. They're just a layer where you can plug it into something else. And so I think it's kind of people think a lot about it, and there's all this kind of companies and economic value being created, but it's kind of it's very simple. It just lets you execute things in a distributed way. I think it's only interesting, in my opinion, when combined with other interesting cryptographic techniques. And so far we've explored very little. A distributed Turing machine can only do so much. And we've seen all of the classic things people were excited about kind of die out a little bit. So I think as people realize, blockchains are not interesting in and of themselves, but as settlement layers for ZK proofs, for everyone to have universal truth, or as ways to connect money to other more interesting cryptography, I think that people will realize, blockchains aren't useful as an ends, but as a means to get something else done. And I think that's kind of how I see this evolving.
Yeah, okay. I like to share 2 of my recent thought about. First is the engineering part of this, and another one is another take on blockchain. So the engineering part is for any technology to be widely accepted. First, you need to get through developers, because you need developers to use that technology to develop apps for the general public to use, right? So there's absolutely no way that you can ask end user anything. The end user should be just totally ignorant of any technology they're using. They just need to use it to their satisfaction, right? So that's the first goal pole that you have to achieve. But in order to reach that goal pole, you need to satisfy the developers. And for developers, it's kind of like similar that you can't require them to know a lot of the internal domain knowledge of the underneath technology. I like to think that requires something like a protocol or internal technology agnostic, that the developers shouldn't know ZK that much. They should know the general purpose of why they need to use it and what kind of characteristic or features they can develop it with, but they don't need to know all the all the inner workings of, for example, algebraic circuits and polynomials, all that, right? For example, it's like in communication, they use APIs to write networking, app, code or app, but they don't need to, sort of kind of argue with all the details of handshakes and TCP/IP, the inner workings, everything. So I think it's the same, but we're getting there. We're getting there by developing like general purpose like ZKVM, and under the general banner of it's verifiable computing, and not just to ZK. Actually, they should feel free to choose what kind of verifiable computing that suits them, right? So original blockchain is also a kind of verifiable computing, but it's very limited, that you can only generate consensus or verify very limited, like you said, like a truth. But with ZK, you have like unlimited power. Of course, you pay the price of it's more expensive. Maybe it's need more time to reach a maturity that is fast and cheap. But I think, yeah, that's where we're going. In terms of blockchain, I like to think blockchain as a, recently I'm dwelling on this thought that blockchains are like universe, right? Like each blockchain is its own universe, but they're kind of siloed. So we humans, we see many blockchains, but the blockchains themselves, like they only know themselves, right? In Bitcoin only knows Bitcoin. It doesn't recognize that there exist other blockchains, and the same for each blockchain. Well, humans actually sit above them, so we're kind of seeing them as a multiverse, like we're above time and space. And what does that mean? That means like we can see a lot of different consensus, and these kind of have a great impact on what kind of future blockchain is, which is not limited to financial apps, right? With AI, we have all kinds of data. So I think blockchain is suitable for reaching a kind of like different point of view of data, with different like consensus, which requires a big like a zoo of different blockchains and universes, and ZK is a great intermedium to act as the interoperability layer. So you can kind of generally prove facts or carry over truths across all different point of view, different data set, different consensus securely. Because right now, like the bridging interoperability is kind of like a just like a duct tape or glue. It's not secure at all because it doesn't really touch any of the universes or blockchains that it connects to. But with zero knowledge proof, you can achieve something like a native level security between all blockchains. So that's something got me excited, and I think that's the future that we can reach to a much broader application space other than just payments like the original. Bitcoin is great, but yeah, there's just why like Bitcoin still occupies the the TVL, everything over 50%, only growing. That's because it's disappointing that the whole blockchain space, crypto space, it's still about something related to payment. Even that is not completely solved. But with zero knowledge proof, we can kind of go much more beyond that. Yeah, and finally, I think that is the future, and that is why I think ZK itself is going to be much bigger than blockchain. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to touch on it's not a completely different point, because everything you have said has to do with the verifiability, the trust or transference of trust. Either you trust that I have something, or either you trust that I have execute something, right? And in most cases, trust equals to accountability. Trust equals to legal implications. Trust can only be turned into actionable, real-world things when the regulatory environment supports that, right? So now moving more to the real world and to the real applications of all these concepts. Myself, in our project in Privado, we see this every day, right? I mentioned it before, but it's not the first time we see a lack of understanding from institutions about this, but also a lack of support in regulating about how trustable or how credible something is when it's verifiable cryptographically, right? Also, CK, I think in many institutions is still not seen as secure or safe enough cryptography, still seen as experimental by many regulators, right? So what is your view on that? What are your experiences on that? And more important, what is the impact that this has on your projects? And what changes or shifts do you think are needed to support the application of CK to real world cases? In the scope of regulatory changes or acceptance.
I'd like to maybe offer a view on this, and I'd love to have you folks thought on that. It's the end goal here is to establish trust. That's the end goal. You want to be able to trust something, either a piece of computation, a balance on a website, or whatever. So you have the main two ways we've done it is either zero trust or full trust. Full trust is I trust my bank. I trust my bank that they're not mismanaging my fund because I have a legal contract with them, and there's an entire, it's like an L2 built on top of the layer 1 of the law, and not because these laws exist that I'm able to trust what the bank is doing. So that's one, that's fully like trustful. And then you have blockchain, where we decided to remove trust. I think the term either was coined or popularized by blockchain of trustlessness. I do not need to trust anyone. What interests me about what specifically the kind of affordances that we can do with the probability, validity proofs, et cetera, is that you open up a spectrum between 0 and 1. And this idea that we were talking about right before of the proof of passport is extending the trust that you have that the government is managing their keys well. It's extending it for the application that you want to build, but you do not need to ask for permission. That's really what I think is the key unlock of like the expansion of cryptographic keys, basically. You get 50 shades of trust in a way, and I like the term like vices and or crimes, and the kinky stuff comes into. What do you think?
Yeah, I think a lot of the tension between the general public and the regulator body and our industry is mostly misunderstanding or misunderstanding of the role of technology. I was fascinated about how people see technology, like in over the last 100 or more years. I remember like reading that just at the turn of the 20th century, that the U.S. Congress, right? They pass the laws that it needs to be handwritten. If it's not handwritten, they don't even trust like printing. So
even the idea of signatures, like it's very skeuomorphic, like you sign things.
If a human writes it, then it's the real law. It's very ceremonial. So I think this is just this relation is perceptive, right? So I think all the techniques are there, right? Like for example, at the border, the control, like it's considered to be the authorities are so like blunt, right? It's no one feels like they're treated like a human being a lot of time, right? Just it's the most unpleasant interface between a regulated body is at the point of access control, right? So that's you feel the full blunt of authority or that kind of uneasiness. Zero knowledge proof, can make this experience actually much nicer, but the regulatory body has to enable laws to allow this technology to be used. It's like that, right? Like, printed is okay, right?
Let me
like
give
that.
a couple of examples to make it super down to earth. I usually think this is going to be close to you, right? So right now, using your project, I can generate a credential or a CK attestation on chain on an email that I've received, right? If it's signed by someone, right? So imagine that I receive an email from the government, right? That says that this is my name and my address. Do you envision that at any point in time that will be legally binding? That this CK attestation on chain can be presented to a government body to prove any of these things, because that's the regulatory environment. Another case is proof of execution, right? You mentioned we can prove that an agent has run a certain model and a certain parameters, right? Is that legally binding when we are trying to prove that the bot is adheres to the European standards of data protection, for example, right? So this is all these proofs seems to be very technologically sound and good and beneficial, but then when the rubber meets the road, right, how far do you think we are from these things to be accepted in the real world?
Yeah, I think it comes down to a question of like what creates legitimacy, like what do people trust and why do they trust it? And I think the government is kind of a last adopter. Like they will adopt or trust a thing once the rest of the world has already talked about it, touched it, adopted it, whatever. And we saw this in like how they had AI regulation, or how even I would say they're like 5 to 10 years behind in crypto regulation. Like they're not really, proactive on the new things coming out. They're still kind of focused on the like classic scams, which I think is good. But it's kind of, it means that whether these ZK proofs are relevant to the government or not is sort of feels like a question that's like N years out. Like I think the real question to be asking is how do we get people and then companies and then organizations and then institutions to adopt these or trust these, and what are the things that lead to trust? So for instance, if a ZK proof is locking a lot of money on chain, then it's more likely to be secure, similarly to how hash functions were adopted. Because hash functions were used so ubiquitously, they were like, okay, because this thing secures all the communication, probably there's no hash collisions. And I think this is kind of how people determine legitimacy. They're like, oh, are there people using it? Does it secure a lot of money? Does it seem secure? Are there bug bounties? Things like that. And I think that the government trusting it or accepting it will come way downstream of that. And even before governments, there's other bodies that I would argue matter more, like maybe a standards body saying this is important or this is necessary, we should have selective disclosure or whatever, is more important to the world adopting it than a government saying we should have it. But also I think new governments can be very progressive on these things. The US government is probably the last government to do anything, but EU governments are very proactive on regulation. And I think if you present to EU legislators, hey, you can force people to do selective disclosure. You don't have to have them keep private data on their servers. And that way, when their server leaks, the whole thing you're trying to protect with GDPR, it won't matter because they're only storing proofs. And I think if people were able to communicate with, say, the EU government that's passing these laws like GDPR about these kind of affordances, I think they would absolutely jump on. They'd be like, oh, great, like what are the things we need to spur the adoption? And you mentioned the 5% thing, like it sounds like they're thinking about it already. So I'm optimistic that as these things are both useful to people and seem intuitive / legitimate to people, adoption will increase naturally.
I think there's this idea of like customs. Like it has to become customary before it goes into law. You look at like the Homestead Act in 1852 in the US, I think. It put into law something that in the US like people were just doing naturally, which is you were the owner of a piece of land if you were living on it for at least 3 years. But people were already doing it, and it was like fully decentralized law. It was customary, and then you put this into law. And I really agree with what you were saying about standards. It's a question of customs. Like, oh, it's better to do it this way. It's cooler.
Yeah, I think I agree with all the other panelists has been said. But just to add on, right, I think there are two faults. One is the government still think about the decentralization is equivalent to anti-government. So that's where the blockchain has been really difficult to push forward with so many behavior users on the blockchain still doing something bad. At the same time, blockchain itself for the different infras have a different belief on how the decentralization needs to be built. Like there are so many layer twos, 95% of the layer twos are doing OP, right? And I heard a company recently who are helping other company to launch their own layer two. End up, the other company want to leave from this platform, but somehow they cannot because the company helping doing the layer twos are actually holding the key of the customer, and they just don't want to give the key. So for blockchain, how can you do like that, right? So these give the industry really a bad thoughts on what these guys are doing, right? I think, so to us, we need to really act and also start to do more education at the same time, really start to adopt the technology to make it really decentralized.
Yeah, not your key, not your roll-up, it seems.
Exactly, right?
Yeah, I agree with Neil that education is of the paramount importance. And I think, I felt like maybe the tide is turning because we can see that the Bitcoin is actually getting into the mainstream, at least in the US. Yeah, we'll see, but
I think
yeah.
and on the education part, how many of your companies is investing in lobbying or educating legislators?
I'm lobbying that we learn ZK ourselves. I'm widely uneducated. We need to invest more.
It's interesting because there is companies like Microsoft or Google, when they want to put a standard on the government, they lobby a lot and they educate institutions a lot. They spend a lot of time making sure that their standards get approved by NIST or other organizations, right? And I think that this is probably an area of improvement for the CK community, right? Especially seeing how little is known about CK in all these organizations. Okay, so next question is about adoption, but I think I'm going to make a mix between that and the last question because we are
Spice it up.
We are taking quite a bit of time in each question, but I think I can mix two, right? Questions were about the speed of adoption and the future of CK, right? I would like to turn this question into what I think are areas of use of CK, right? Because I see, as I said in the introduction, right? In the beginning, people were thinking about CK in terms of privacy. I have information that I want to share, so I can prove. But then later, at some point, we realized, oh, we can prove execution as well. And it was then suddenly all about scalability. In blockchain, that has a big impact, given the cost of infrastructure on running things. So I think for some time, we have shifted the CK attention to scalability. Now, I think that's a field that is becoming more and more mature to the point of reaching production readiness. And now, suddenly, not suddenly, but we see a lot of attention again on identity, on privacy, and the new concept that is arising, which is the proving execution not for the sake of scalability, but for the sake of trusting that we are running the right thing, right? And that's especially in the context of AI, right? So these, I would say, let's put three areas, right? Privacy, execution with scalability, and execution for trustability. How you see the adoption speed in each of these areas? What is your bet, right? In terms of if I had to put my money where I would put it, probably I know the answers given your projects, right? But then I'll leave you some time as well to give your opinion on how you see the future of CK in terms of future adoption, development, trends.
I can paint a picture of something that I 100% believe is going to happen, which is if you look at like computers and the internet, there was a word for a time which was digitizing. It was about, oh, we need to bring the data outside of the internet on the internet. And at the same time, you had a fun thing, which is that the internet had to work with the existing infrastructure, mainly landlines, phone lines. It was a second-class citizen. And the thing that happened afterwards is that we created so much more data with the internet and with computers that digitizing doesn't really even make sense anymore. And we even flipped the phone to the point that now you're using like FaceTime more, you use like phones more on the internet that you would use back on the phone lines. And I think it's going to be the same thing for, I'm going to say, attested data in general, data on which you can make statements and make truth statements for legitimacy. Right now, we're just, like, there's so few pieces of data on which we can, that are signed, and on which we can build upon. Like emails, we have this. There's the Cursive team has a really cool repo called Stuff with Signatures. And it's depressingly sparse. There's just so few things, it's so sad. So you have emails, passports. We realized in France that there's a standard called 2D doc, and we just signed a gazillion number of documents like utility bills, identity cards. So that's cool. We can extend this. And what I believe is going to happen is that we're going to start with this, and this is going to be extremely fast. We're going to be able to onboard people. Like the cool thing with ZK email is that every single person on the planet has a wallet, theoretically. And so imagine a worldwide airdrop. Like in France, like we could, like with 2D doc thing, we can airdrop 65 million people like that. So it's going to go like extremely fast, quickly. And the second thing that's going to happen is we're going to flip signed data. We're going to create much more data that is perfectly amenable for this, the same way that we had fiber networks, and then we put the phone on it. So I'm willing to bet on that.
Yeah, I actually like Sylve's point a lot. Like, because you can have these signatures around the world, like the way we currently think about people doing things with blockchains, oh, they got to first get a wallet, and then they got to interact with this thing, and they got to understand why they have to click 15 times to get something done. But this is way cooler, right? Like this, you can say, oh, like, I'm going to automatically make it so that everybody who's a French citizen can access my thing, or everybody who's graduated from the school can access my thing, or everyone who is part of this organization can access my thing on day one. And I think that's like super compelling for adoption. I think the adoption patterns are going to look totally different from what they've looked like in blockchain. It's not going to be like emergent from people and their friends. It's going to be emergent from communities that are like, oh, that's cool. I can build this on top of my community. So I like that a lot.
I mean, we were talking about the fact that Bitcoin is going mainstream. Like, we're not mainstream. We're not mainstream by any margin. Even the smallest, like, top 500 internet company has like 10 times more users than any of the, like, all the Web3 users combined, and 90% of them are bots. And it's just bad. We need to do a lot better than this.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of delusion in the space. Like, people think, oh, I have 10 million users and I have all this money, and the VCs, like, for some reason see this as legitimate. It's like, no, you have like 18 users and they all run Sybil bots.
9 of them are in your company.
Yeah. And I think we could just use a lot more intellectual honesty if we're going to get real adoption. I think stop throwing around numbers like you have 10 million users. Stop throwing around numbers like we have one user with one product that matters. And when I see that, I'm like, okay, like, at least they're honest. And I think that's where we'll actually see real adoption, is when you solve a real problem for one person. Then you go from there. I think that'll be quite cool.
Neil?
Yeah, for, from the future for the key perspective, I used to ask Eli from Stackware. I asked him, like, zero knowledge is supposed to be for privacy in the first place, but why you end up doing scalability? The answer is no one wants to pay for privacy. Scalability actually saves the cost for the people doing on layer one. That's where, everything started, right? And for me, with all the AIs and also the games on-chain, but people declare they are autonomous, but if they put all the computations on blockchain, it's really heavy. And now maybe ZK has another way to save the cost. So from there, I bet on the computation and trustability due to the cost saving for the people I really use. At least they are building for that, right? I'm not sure how many users they have. But at least if they really believe that's what they are building and the ZK help them to save the cost, I think it's a no-brainer for that to really to be adopted.
Yeah, let me just follow up with Neil's thought that computation is beneath everything. So our society in the world today is running on computers, right? And we have all our data kind of put online. So our digital existence is composed of data, right? It's like we have another us, totally different on chain. Instead of like DNA and cells and proteins, we're comprised of all kinds of data. And right now, the old economy and regimes of society is arranged with very static set of rules, and those are kind of forced onto all the data that we generated. And for example, blockchain is about like assets and money, and that is actually forced upon everyone, right? And with AI, we also have this thing to align our values with data, through data, but everyone's just talking one kind of AI, one kind of alignment, right? Google and Meta, they have their own alignment requirement, and government might have another one. But I like to say like each one, like we're all humans, but all our DNA are different. So naturally, our data is actually very different. We can see them as like point of view data. And for data to be different and have each individuality kind of manifested in their online presence needs a lot of computation. Computation is the foundation to make data live, to make data different, to represent all kinds of point of view. So, and to kind of reach different kind of consensus for that, ZK is a fundamental technology, and computation, verifiable computation, represented by the ZK technology, I think will be the glue for the future, the AI-dominated and all kinds of point of view of data. And for your ultimate question, I think if one technology is far removed from the user, the much adoption it will have. For example, today we're everyone's using like TikTok, your email, everything. You never really think of TCP/IP. That's because that technology is couple layers, many layers down. So I think that's our model too. We build ZKVM. So this is a very like low level beneath everything. We're even below like EVM, or we're below all the other VMs. So if we can build this, we can build something that can provide the general purpose verifiable computing for every technology that's built on top of it. And I think that's the kind of way for mass adoption to really happen.
Okay. Well, I'll still have some time for questions, but I want to do the close up and then open for questions. First of all, thank you, all of you, for your participation. Again, I really went through all your projects, and they all look very interesting and very promising. Thank you for your points of view. I would like to summarize what I hear in your last question. If I would be in the audience, I would listen to your input and would think, okay, so in the short term, I would put my money on scalability. On the long term, I would expect ZK to solve for the verifiability and trustfulness of the internet as a whole, right? If that's a good summary, I think we can. Thank you. I think we can close it here.